Yeah, I went
turned
ahead
it
and
on.
shared my screen just to get things kicked off, and I would say, yeah, go ahead, Cello, and start the recording. Um, we've got a good contingent here, and we've got some guests with us that are returning. They're not really guests; they're returning utility partners who are focused on some great work with some of the other teams within Wise. And that's really the focus of our agenda today, is to find out some updates and some work that has been happening within our asset management team as well as our technology team, and how that connects. So like last week, we talked about, let me pull up the agenda here. So yeah, the last or 2 weeks ago, we talked about integration of the different teams across Wise, and Cello shared an update on kind of what's happening with the assessment side of things. And everybody expressed some interest, or a lot of folks expressed some interest in hearing particularly what's going on with asset management, how that connects with our CIP team and CIP delivery and planning activities, as well as the technology group as well. So we've got Mert and Chris here on the asset management side, and then Ting from the technology group, technology and data analytics team. So I got to make sure I say that team right. And we've got, yeah, a pretty good group. I wanted to allow people a couple of minutes to get in here, but Cello, any other introductory remarks?
I was just wondering, Ting, I know you have a time issue. Is it that you were not able to make the first or the last 30 minutes, or did I mess it up with a different meeting? Am I confused?
Yeah, that was a different meeting, Cello. I'm out here
Okay.
for the whole hour.
Okay, sorry about that.
Great question though. Yeah, so I've got it laid out. I've got Mert and Chris going first, and then Ting, you going second. But if we need to adjust, we can be flexible on that front. But Ting, it sounds like you're here for the duration, so if you guys are good with it, we'll let Mert and Chris do their thing first, and then you can follow up after that. But yeah, I stole some slides from Cello's talk last time, but obviously we've got the people, processes, and technology, and we're pretty heavily focused on the process side within CIP. But obviously, a lot of the themes we've heard about from people as they're implementing changes to their processes, that obviously the people side of it is huge in change management, and then also leveraging technology and figuring out how to bring that in. So that's part of the theme today, is to kind of bring it all together and share what we're doing. And then we've got lots of teams working in Wise this year. I think 7 or 8 different teams going. And obviously we're over here with Team CIP, and Team Assets is where Mert and Chris have been focusing a lot of time and energy. And they've been at this for quite a while too. These are our team, and the Team Assets team are some of the original teams that started back in the Water Research Foundation UAIM days, have continued forward, and I think now are in our 3rd official year of being a team working on different initiatives. And then this last year, the team analytics started up based on utility partners saying this is an area of huge need, and we need to get some people focused, and we've got a lot of interest in people that are interested in this area. So they've got started and have been off to the races with their work as well. So I'm excited to hear from Ting. So that's all the introductory stuff I had. I guess, Cello, do you want to introduce our presenters and get them going?
I think what I propose is they can just introduce themselves to make it less formal. I don't think that any of them are very shy. So
that's right. And yeah, that's a good point. This is not intended to be a formal presentation. They're here to share with us. They've got some slides, but by all means, if you got questions, raise your hand. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Mert, Chris, and you guys can carry us forward with some discussion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Dan. So my name is Mert Muftugil. So I'm the supervising engineer in the asset management branch for Portland Water Bureau. I think I may have sort of crossed paths with all of you at some stage. So very nice to see you all. And Chris, if you want to introduce.
Yeah, thanks, Mert. Thanks, Dan, for inviting us. My name is Chris Wu from Metro Vancouver. I'm looking after the asset management systems and processes in my organizations. And also I'm excited to share some of our thoughts. So for the presentations, I think Mert will do the most of sort of the talking, but I'll chime in as needed. And apology front, I have a meeting at 8 that I need to attend, so I may have to leave early, but yeah, thanks for inviting us for this opportunity.
We'll probably finish our speaking part, speaking part of our presentation by then anyway, hopefully, even though I could be verbose at times. But yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to stick around. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully this will come through with no problems. Let's do this. All right, so I'm going to switch to presentation mode. Go. All right, I hope it's the main slide coming through, not the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, let's, we have a few slides, and I guess one thing we weren't sure was we wanted to start off with where we left off as far as the to-be business process workflow for developing an asset management plan is concerned. I'm guessing here, maybe not everybody here was involved in this phase, so we wanted to cover this. So we started obviously with an as-is document. We based that on actually how we sort of go through that process in Portland Water as an inspirational start, and then we ended up, the utilities that participated in this track ended up getting together and then making modifications, and then maybe making certain things also a little generic, so it's not necessarily a one utility specific document. And then we basically developed this. Now, I don't necessarily, I'm happy to share this, obviously, for those of you who are interested in it, and Cello, I'm sure, has it in the library anyway. But I'm not going to go into all the details other than to note that, there is a concept of steering committee at the very top, making some of the, asset management program related executive decisions. And then we have at the bottom the asset management plan development team. So that's where bulk of the work for the development of an asset management plan takes place. You may be familiar with some of these steps, such as condition assessments, developing management strategies, assessing risk, and so forth. And then in the middle is asset management functions that are found in different groups. Some of them are performed in individual groups. Some of them are performed within the asset management group itself. Most of them in the asset management group itself. So just to recapture the business process workflow work that we've done over the past couple of phases. In summary, just basically why we even do this in the first place is that just identify the involved parties, figure out what takes place in what order, who makes decisions. You can assign resource needs because once you know who's doing what, and if you have a rough idea of on average how long an hour a task takes, how many hours a task takes, you could actually come up with, okay, it's going to take us like 600 hours to develop this asset management plan, for example, or update it. Developing it from scratch will take longer. And then it would also, the steps can also help us develop effectiveness and efficiency metrics. And the data input needs, of course, for what we need to do, which is a big deal for asset management plans. So after that phase was done and when we developed the business process workflow, there was a follow-up phase in these tracks. And in the case of the asset management plan development, we held a few focused workshops with the utilities that was participating. This was actually led by our utility partners, Team 2100, out of the United Kingdom. And then one of the topics there was that phase was highly collaborative. And different asset management sort of workshop topics were covered. Service levels, use of risk, so level of service, use of risk. Also, digital asset management plan development was also covered. That's an attempt to make the documents a little bit more of a living document that's actually connected to the data in the back end that can actually be updated by running queries and reports and having sort of like these GIS maps showing more real-time data. It's actually pretty nice especially for pipelines with the help of GIS. It makes it quite visual. So these topics were basically voted as the highest, and those were discussed. Digital AMPs, criticality, asset criticality, and other prioritization methods, which again is a potential link to CIP process, and of course life cycle modeling and life cycle costs, which is also a pretty close link to CIP development and prioritization and business case input processes as well. So we can cover those in a little bit more detail as we go into other phases. So once we identified those three areas to focus on, more focused workshops were held. This is an example for life cycle cost and modeling, just because we also, in our current phase, chose that one to dig a little bit deeper into, and I will cover that in our approach document. But some meetings were held. Information was gathered in terms of data availability, what kind of challenges our organizations are facing to be able to make progress in these like three topics of interest to them that they voted. Again, just to sort of facilitate the discussion to determine some solutions into what can be done and what can be achieved, what were the expected outcomes and so forth. Again, pretty collaborative, a lot of voting, a lot of independent input followed by discussion. It was actually quite helpful to basically see it from other utilities perspectives. Is the current phase, though, once in our current phase where Chris and I are leading the core team effort, if you will, we chose to primarily focus on the life cycle costs and modeling to sort of dig deeper into that process and then basically develop the sub process associated with that one box that you would see in the developing the asset management plan workflow. So obviously a lot of steps and a lot of people, sort of like a lot of departments need to work together. A lot of different data needs to be collected at different locations to be able to enable life cycle cost and modeling. So that's what we decided to focus on. But it wasn't necessarily right off the bat easy decision for us to pick that. It took us sort of a couple of meetings and discussions just to sort of land on that. Cello helped us utilize the Mentimeter tool. I'm sure you all are familiar with that. So that's where basically the participating utilities in the current phase. Now we are talking about the current phase. Basically identify the topics of interest that they wanted to explore further. So in this case, some of the things that were discussed, and since we are going into a little bit more detail, I'm going to read what's on these slides. But sort of capital commissioning was discussed as a potential, at least it was brought up in high enough numbers. And then let's see, so longer term replacement planning based on life cycle costs was discussed. Level of service actually framework and utilization and setup was also in the works. And then life cycle costs and life cycle cost of system facilities was also brought up in terms of like rolling things up a little bit into from asset to facility levels. But as the discussion sort of progressed, we basically ask the question to utilities in terms of, okay, well, given these topics of interest, where do you think you are doing better? So it was voted that the criticality assessment methods, I guess, was a little bit more familiar to utilities, but lifecycle cost was not as familiar. I personally was expecting even a wider gap, to be honest, in this. in the split, 3.1 to 2.6 out of 5 actually seems, I mean, relatively close to each other. From my personal experience, having worked with multiple utilities, I thought the lifecycle costing capabilities would be much less. But I guess maybe we were a more optimistic group, who knows? But on the reverse version of this question, sort of like the mirror image is that, okay, which one would you like to explore more in more detail? Of course, people sort of focused on where there was less maturity. In this case, it was a life cycle cost. So that was one of the reasons why today in this current phase, we are focusing on life cycle costing. So I wanted to also go over, and maybe because it is relevant in terms of the touch points to CIP, we added a slide here that we used that helped us with our decision making a little bit. So we sort of summarized our discussion points. So I wanted to bring up the criticality and asset life cycle cost thinking the teams had a little bit here. So let's talk about it one by one. Criticality assessment methods first. So concept of criticality, now we call it criticality here. I think if we just carried that language over, but think about it as, business risk exposure. Basically, it's an attempt for risk prioritization. So a couple of things here is that there is a link between asset management, sort of asset criticality or system criticality and so forth, to the enterprise risk management, which is one of our other topics that, even though we are not talking about it in detail today, we are covering it in our team. Of course, basically the link between the enterprise risk management and different levels of sort of asset system process, risk criticality. Chris introduced the Metro Vancouver's consequence of failure assessment criteria around triple bottom line. Thanks again, Chris, for that presentation. One of the things that was discussed, which we think is helpful and relative to the work you're doing on CIP and business cases, is trying to do a better representation of the consequence of failure that we calculate often in some sort of numerical scale or some sort of letter grade, and that being, of course, trying to align the impacts better through monetization of the consequences. So currently we are not following that route necessarily. We chose the life cycle discussion, but this I think is something we can discuss in this team. Some of the members have some experience on this. We discussed the potential risk roll up, because once we could monetize individual assets failure, you could roll those risks up in terms of basically dollar terms. And then you could come up with, okay, which processes or which facilities seem to be posing a higher risk just because of the assets they operate and the function those assets serve. Again, that results in an apples to apples comparison of facilities to each other, because money is a better common denominator than the verbiage that we come up with and then use to score things. And I actually don't personally recall the post-mortem assessment of risk, COF assessments, discussion specifically, other than the fact that, when an asset fails, there's a consequence. And then, we could actually do a sort of calibration of our model in terms of, okay, so this asset failed in the way we thought it would fail in our risk assessments, and what actually happened versus, what we modeled in the first place, so that we could make some sort of a iterative feedback loop in that process. So I think that bullet was intended to cover that discussion. So I'm going to take a quick pause in case, because I'm not sure if I can see any pings or whatever in the presentation mode, but I'm just going to take a pause if there are any initial reactions to this or any questions.
Mert, there's a question in the chat line from Dan Ott. You mentioned intersections between asset management and CIP with criticality and lifecycle costs. Where are you seeing other key intersections do you see between the asset management business processes and CIP planning and delivery processes?
Oh, where are the other ones? Okay, well, I'm going to rely on everybody here, from Scott, Cello, Chris to me, to sort of chime in. But let's see. So one thing that I would like to note is that the initial risk assessments that we perform in asset management planning really just puts forward like the needs. It's one of the inputs into needs prioritization. So, and it's maybe sometimes I like to term it as needs prioritization based on risk. Now, that's basically say, okay, these are like this is our highest risk event we need to take care of. And I think we are all familiar with the matrix, so I don't need to go into too much detail there. But that kind of just like, just stops there at that needs prioritization. So it's one of the many inputs, such as funding sources, permitting difficulties, whether or not it's some sort of like there is some sort of less risk exposing, but still a regulatory driven item that whatever reason didn't score as high in our assessment because maybe it doesn't have as big of a health and safety concern. So that sort of decision making actually will take place still in the CIP prioritization, but it's basically that initial input to it. And just to make it a little bit clearer on the life cycle costing side, the CIP project development, I'm guessing there are all these sort of like certain, I believe there were like the gates in the CIP development process. And some of those actually involve, basically picking the right alternative in the planning phase. And then once it's picked, basically then while it's execution, picking the right perhaps the right design or the right equipment to select for basically just installing.
Yeah, Jenny has her hand up, so we have more questions. I was wondering also if Chris has any thoughts also.
Sorry, yeah, thanks. Mert covered really well, but I want to sort of echo and add to that is, the goal of asset management planning, that's basically summarized in the asset management plan, is to feed in, that investment planning and the intervention of what we need to do on our assets, right? So obviously CIP is the implementing the solutions in a structured manner. So definitely the initial sort of the seeds items, Mert expressed as a needs, which I totally agree. So the needs identifications and prioritization should fit into the CIP so that it can not only just carry out the project, but also throughout the project development cycle, we often find that PMs wants to, or the O&M representative wants to go back to like why we are doing these projects. And that's when asset management plan and the risk assessments and life cycle costing can feed that knowledge in. And obviously, you want to, when you do the projects, you don't want to just choose a needs at a very sort of rough level that's identified in the asset management plan, but also you want it to go through the business casing. And that's when the asset life cycle plays a big role, because you don't want to look at the CapEx comparison only. You want to look at all the other impacts. Yeah, that's where the sort of the key linkages between asset management side and the CIP side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to maybe drive that point a little further, and it's not really individually, risk and asset life cycle sort of impacting CIP, but maybe together. Another good example is that, we don't currently do monetization of our consequence of failure when we do our asset management plans. However, once the needs are identified, prioritized through the asset management plan development, we have a two-step process. So we call it something different, but it's basically a business case development. But we call it a project validation part 1 and part 2. So the first one really is basically a justification process, whether or not the information is sufficient. The need basically just says, okay, well, this need came either from an asset management plan or from a group that actually currently doesn't have an asset management plan for that asset type. But the need arrived, it landed on our laps. All right, great, let's work with it. And then let's go through some steps to do the justification. That generally is, relatively quick. But once that's done, and we know that the needs is sort of justified in that regard, we jump into more traditional sort of business case assessments where, we come up with alternatives, we compare their life cycles, and more importantly, we track current and future risk. Of course, one of the alternatives is status quo, And the other is, of course, like alternative A, B, C, or whatever. And then once you execute them, there's a reduction in risk. Different, but yeah, there is a reduction in risk, different across alternatives. So one of the things that
sorry, I'm just concerned a little bit about the time, and there are more questions, Mert. So
I don't get them. Unfortunately. Okay.
Yeah, and Jenny
has her hand up. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jenny. Go ahead. Okay, I can finish this maybe later. Jenny, go ahead so that we don't miss the opportunity.
This is a bit of a different question because I find that our team gets stuck and whether we go wide or go deep. And so when you're looking at these, I'm curious about that process of if you have 10, 15 asset classes or AMP teams trying to develop life cycle costs for all 15 or starting with one. And then moving to the next one, or kind of anything in that map of, has your team kind of talked about a best approach of how you apply all of these things to all of your asset classes? Is it better to start with one asset class and mature it all the way to having those life cycle costs and that monetized risk that informs your CIP, or kind of doing your pump stations and then doing your wells and of that monetized risk, and then the next step? Just curious if that's come up at all.
It does, and it's in the next slide. I was going to jump into our sort of life cycle cost scope document, if you will, just our sort of guidance document. So that we discussed this exact same thing actually, and we have utilities that actually work with water only, wastewater only, and we also have utilities that actually operate in both spaces. So what we decided was let's actually, let's not bite more than we can chew. And then we picked an asset type and an asset class that basically is found across all three types of, water, sewer, or combined utilities. Just, there's no reason to hide it. It's not a secret. We picked a good old-fashioned pump and motor because everybody has that. So we wanted to use that as a generic asset that basically we want to develop the process around. And when we do the process, of course, we would actually do it primarily with the data, the failure data and the cost data around pumps and pump motors. At the same time, the concepts at least will apply to other asset types or other asset categories. Of course, the failure profile, decay profile for for like a transmitter, or for like an MCC will be different than a pump. But the fact that, we want to maintain and, sort of project the corrective maintenance cost increase on average over an asset life cycle, like that concept is the same. It's just that the rate of increase will be different across different asset types. So we wanted to focus on this one asset type with the understanding that after certain sort of coefficient adjustments for different assets, the logic would still be applicable to other asset types. Yeah, we had a little bit of do we want to do multiple asset types, or do you want to cast like a super wide net? And then we sort of decided to narrow down and maybe it's dig deeper around that one asset type.
Chris, before you leave, you may want to say something because I know you have to skip out, and then Ting has a question.
No, I think Mert covered it really well. I mean, we wanted to do a pilot to one of the major asset types and then go from there. But it's all about, the criticality to your services, right? I mean, all of your asset classes may be all important, but maybe not be equally important, and really want to target the ones that are impacting the most and you see the deficiencies the most. So I think it's depending on the utility situations and how their assets are grouped and providing the service to the utility. So thanks, Scott, for reminding me. So yeah, I have to go. So my apologies again, but yeah, let me know and let Mert know if you have any other questions.
Okay, we can connect with you, Chris. Good luck at your meeting. Do we have a few more minutes though? Because I wanted to just wrap a few things up. How much time do I have, Dan?
Ting has a question, and then we're at the top of the hour, so a few more minutes. But let's see first what Ting's question is.
Okay, I actually set up my phone here, so I see the question, what does DAM mean? So I'm going to go back. I think that was maybe on another slide. If I'm not mistaken, let me know, please, Ting. DAM.
Yeah, the digital AMP. Oh, it's AMP, sorry.
Oh, sorry. That's okay. Got it. Digital amps. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's that.
Asset management plan.
Living document, yeah, digital asset management plans.
Oh, so it's a platform to capturing or digital a plan for capturing your asset management plan.
It is, and it was Team 2100 presented it out of UK. So it's basically, you interact with the document. It's like a website, in a browser, and then it's you go to this table and bring that table to the browser. You go to this map in GIS server and bring that map here, and then there's the caption. So it's kind of like a Microsoft Access, or some sort of like Crystal Reports almost, but expressed in a web page.
We have a recording of that session, Ting, so I can find their presentation and send a link to everybody so they can check it out. The digital asset management. It's Jenny said in the chat that they did a story map in GIS that was really exciting thing to look at. That's great. Thank you.
So I want to just take maybe just 1-2 minutes just to wrap up, because I wanted to strengthen those connections. All this sort of was, again, just a background, but just to wrap things up. So we do track monetization of our consequence when we do business risk. Our business cases. So we actually track the status quo asset risk increasing from it levels today to a level in the future. And then we actually track the life cycle cost alongside with that. So we track both of these things together. And then generally the point where they intersect is, like an alternatives life cycle cost and the risk, like where they intersect is the point where we say, okay, well, yes, this is a need coming up, and then we need to do this in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. Just find that optimal point where the investment will equal the risk that the lack of investment will cause at that point in time. So that's one, and the other one was that once we know the life cycle impacts of an asset, and not just necessarily the initial capital cost, the idea is that we could do perhaps some better decisions in terms of what kind of asset to install where, or what. I don't know, sometimes perhaps some models of pumps are working out better for us just because of the operating environment than other ones. So we could actually know that and choose those ones, even though they are not necessarily the least expensive option off the gate, but they may be, they would be over their 20 or 30 year life. Anyway, I think I kind of like maybe a few more things to cover, but I think we are out of time. So I'm not going to go into the individual scope development steps because that's going to take another 10 minutes at least.
Damn.
Hey, Mert, great job. This is like perfect. So I want to just mention to the team that, Mert touched on any specific things that you're like, oh gosh, I'd really love to get a deeper dive into that. We can get some other sessions scheduled up. Obviously, Mert and Chris are both a wealth of knowledge in asset management planning. So thanks again for jumping in, and this may be a to be continued for a future session. So so shoot me a note, team and members, and let me know. But yeah, I think unless you've got any burning questions right now, I think we'll go ahead and transition so we can give Ting some time. I'm sure that will also be a similar theme where it charges and gets some thoughts going and excitement going. So thank you, Mert. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ting. Introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. This is really a great presentation first, Mert, and thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here. So just a little bit myself, I'm from Clean Water Services, also from the West Coast. So I'm leading the Digital Solutions Department, which is formally the IT department. So it's a very heavily technology focused. So our team is I think it's definitely a newer team, like Mert introduced as the data and analytics, technology and data analytics team. So we have a lead, myself, as well as from WSSC, Toho Water Authority, and KC Water. And we have a wonderful team, and Jenny was part of the team, is part of the team as well. Cello and Scott and Mike, everyone else to support us and guide us to go where we are. So as we look at technology and data analytics, because it's such a broad topic that captures you know pretty much everything. So this is a Mentimeter exercise that Cello has started, and we looked at what our challenges are. So just going through this, which is a pretty interesting. So from a technology project prioritization and review, so you can see a lot of this is still pretty low from a 1 to 4 scale. So it's there is definitely a lot of consistency as well as inclusive for all the stakeholders and documentation of the process that could be improved. Another one, I think this is, again, it's in general, people say the technology is readily available. It's getting to really, it's not about the technology, but it's more about the data, the technology integration, as well as the estimating cost, which is getting into this, the BCE and the cost estimate we heard earlier, as well as the user requirement being clear and complete. Again, I think there is definitely a strong link with this one and the BCE and all the project discussion we had. And then from a data standpoint, so, you know, we see very universal data is not always accurate and reliable, and it's not easily accessible. So I think this is and also we don't often have the data that's needed to make the decisions and things. So some of the comments, it really highlights the prioritization on the technology projects is needed in order to align organizational challenges and strategic priorities. And some of this could turn into CIP project and other things. So that's how our team has focused on to just, even though it's a technology and data analytics team, but we kind of focus on the process side of things with the technology related project. Let me go through. So this is as Clean Water Services, we are going through this digital solutions, the prioritization framework. So this is something that as I'm actively developing as well as working with the team here to refine and for the whole team here. So when we look at the technology project investment categories, so there are foundational, so these are your typical IT type of project, like patching, upgrade, and type of work. There is from there's the operational side of things. So it's the workflow automation, system integration, and then there is the strategic. What we do is the business intelligence, dashboarding, and cybersecurity, and getting to this aspirational work like a real-time decision support and IoT or digital twin type of work. So in a nutshell, the overall the sequence framework is proposed here is starting with the department priorities, so that each department already have a prioritized work to submitting to the steering committee. So we talked about the steering committee will evaluate. I'll get into more details later on. And then getting to the SAG member approval. SAG is our executive team, so it's strategic advisory group. So they will approve or disapprove and then getting to the project implementation. So the project definition is the work request. Actually, it may be reduced to 20, but it's in general. So we want to set a boundary for what is needed for this prioritization versus things that just continuously improve, and then you can just continue working with the team directly on that side. And then I'll go into more details with this process diagram that Mike has helped. So Mike or Cello or Scott, feel free to jump in as I'm going through this diagram. So as you see, the department is starting with it's proposed is a quarterly process that triggers each department or program submit their candidate project. So there is a scopes and this will formulate the IT project. And then so they are required to conduct a thorough assessment to support a BCE. So I see there is a link, and will be great to hear all of your thoughts. So with this, the list of a project with scope and the budget, and then that goes to the program manager, and then that will create the calls for the steering committee. So there are some backlogged items, and will be reassessed in next quarter. There is stuff that we'll need to put in the parking lot, depends on the readiness and availability. And then the steering committee, this is a new process that it's a proposed, so it's not in place, but it's the general idea is to having the steering committee to look at the criteria, which include how the right mix of a simple versus complex project, what's the focus, what's the coordination effort, support for existing systems, or whether it's new item, what are the risk, business impact, cost, or ROI, how does the project alignment between technical and business priorities. There may be a proof of concept and required before we even do the implementation. So this committee will produce the recommended a quarterly project, a list of things for the SAC member to review. And then they could either approve, and then it gets to the project team to implement, and then that will end the quarterly process. Or it could go to the disapproved and go back to the steering committee for further evaluation, or even further goes to the department to continue refine their scope or budget before they submit again. So this is the high level process, and each one have a sign here, plus sign. So where the team, the technology and data analytics team are planning to is drill down into each box and then develop a more detailed process for each one of these boxes. And then where we are is we are also developing a goal tree. I think that's what called Cello. So this is a learn from energy team that Eric has done a goal tree on their energy program. So we're developing something similar for this team and looking to what are our goals and how we develop some of the KPIs to support this work, and identify and leverage and capture the value for technology to support business. So that's what I have, and so Scott, Cello, or Mike, feel free to chime in or any questions or discussions at this point.
Ting, do you want to comment a little further on the relationship to the CIP, or if it's not part of the CIP, it's still a capital project, or a lot of them are, some aren't, but a lot of them are. And I think Dan and others would see some similarity between what you're doing and what they're doing on the CIP.
Yeah, I think it's both sides. So definitely, some of this project, especially the larger initiatives, could lead to a CIP project. So this is starting with the quarterly process, but we're hoping also it's going to be both the bottom up as well as the top down. So the top down is coming from a strategic advisory group or kind of organizational leadership and initiatives, and getting to a CIP project, in which the technology is a part of that. So Scott, definitely there is a strong connection with the CIP project. In addition, I'm also saying sometimes with the CIP project, not necessarily looking at the technology until later, once the project is in place, and saying we need IT or digital solutions to support on this and that. So I'm also trying to capture that ahead of time. So identify for CIP project, what are the technology needs, and then we can put into our plan to better align and plan the workload to support the CIP project. So I think it's both ways, Scott.
Yeah, a lot of things in common with the BCE approach that both teams have, even with the asset management team, in terms of looking at risk and looking at, alternative ways to solve the problem and whether intervention is needed and that kind of thing. Dan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious, and maybe you said this, I didn't quite catch it. Have you implemented or started using this process? Or are you still kind of in the define it and then start to implement it within your utility?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. We're still defining this, so it's a perfect timing as I'm working with the Wise as well as working internally, trying to say, this is a process the team has discussed and developed, so I like to adopt to clean water services. So not fully adopted yet, but definitely there is a agreement on the general process, but we are also, like Scott was asked, so we're also putting some of the top-down process to enhance this process here. Then, so right now, as the process is a pretty ad hoc, so the requests are coming out from everywhere. So and I think it's I mentioned here is the change management. So I think it's going to take probably 6 months to a year for people to get used to developing a BCE and a prioritization. We don't have a project steering committee yet, so it's going to take some time.
Sure. I guess I'd just be curious if you've shared this with some of the people in your organization who maybe haven't seen business process models or aren't familiar with this kind of thing. What kind of reaction are you getting from folks on this?
Yeah, it's a next step. So they saw the presentation and there were some comments and things I'm refining. So once that's done, and then we'll adjust this process to share with the internal team.
Okay. Mert has his
Very
hand
good.
up.
Yes, thank you, Joe. I wanted to just make sure, how do I lower the hand? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked with this. So I was just gonna say, but Ting just captured it. But I think one of the most important, parts of the workflow is the fact that change management is involved there, which of course, it's gonna make or break anything. And then right under it also, in the previous swim lane, there is the criteria the steering committee considers.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that is actually quite good. And some of the fact that steering committee considers those, I mean, those are your also your prioritization, criteria almost for, deciding across different teams. So I don't know, just felt like almost like a natural link to, the business case process, the CIP prioritization process too.
Cello.
Yeah, yes, we did definitely see a parallel and a similarity between the business case evaluation for the CIP, which includes, looking at different options and a similar approach to look at priorities for ranking or prioritizing digital solution projects. So within the team, we talked about having a conversation. We've actually scheduled a session similar to this for Duncan to talk about business case evaluation for the CIP to the technology and data analytics team, so that we get the cross-pollination between the two efforts. I think that's, Dan, what you were kind of alluding to earlier. And I also want to quickly say that I put 2 links into the chat line there to the videos to part 1, Digital Asset Management Plan Workshop, and part 2. I found 2 videos. I didn't have a chance to watch them now. I don't remember why we had. Do you remember, Scott, why we had 2 parts to this workshop?
I think that there were multiple workshops, so maybe it was the first workshop versus the second.
Yeah, I have them on the same day, but it is what it is. There are 2 videos, part 1 and part 2.
Dan, I would also mention, and Ting brought this up, is that she's developing this currently. And Ting, one of the benefits that you've gotten is basically you put this out there and you've been able to inform your process through input from other WISE team members. And that's been
Yes.
your strategy, and that's what you're trying to do too, Dan, with CIP.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, Ting, on the technology side. It seems like within our organization, the past has been, I don't know, kind of the wild, wild west, where people within different silos, they see a cool technology and they buy it and they just start using it. Is that what you're hearing? Is that true for your organization?
Yeah.
What other organizations are like? And then I guess when you talk about change management, are folks like, oh yeah, well, we think we need to do this process, or are they resistant to like, hey, we kind of like the wild, wild west here. We kind of like being able to do our own thing.
Yeah, you are definitely not alone there, Dan. I think it's we're similar in that standpoint. I think it's really, some people really good advocating for their technology project and they like this process, versus others sometimes have been waiting for quite a while and haven't got the project finished. And it's all subjective. And this is I'm hoping to bring some more of a consistent and transparent process to the organization. And especially now we all use technology and data. But it's a big process.
If I can just say, we've been looking at connection between processes and technology, but there's also a third aspect that has to do with people and change management that comes into the picture. So that's what we're trying to do with WISE, is integrate these things so we get a full picture. And a lot of the challenges in implementing whether it's projects or technology really has to do also. There's a strong connection with managing the people side of things. So we have a lot of work going on that end as well.
Very good, Ting. Great job, great presentations, good update. Any other final questions before we're getting closer to, we're about 10:23 right now, so we got a couple minutes. If anybody's got a final question or two.
Not so much a question, but I just, I'm impressed that Ting is the lead, the manager for her technology section or IT section, is so involved in the actual process of project and program delivery. I tell you, we have a new IT manager coming on board, and I'm hoping I can get this new manager ingrained in the organization to the point where they understand our processes. It can really help from internal. I think you really have things moving in the right direction there. I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thanks for your kind words. But sign him up for the WISE this team. So this is what we talk about every week or every other week.
Yeah, no, that's great.
One of the challenges, I think, Brian, is also that the nature of technology has changed, and the nature of the technology has been playing a different role. So, for example, they used to have, engineering, operations, and IT. And a few years back, when we bought the house, we bought a dishwasher and it wasn't working. So I called the people to tell them that's not working. So the guy comes with a truck and walks into the house, no tools, nothing. And I'm thinking, what is going on? So he pulls a USB stick out of his pocket, puts it into the dishwasher, looks at the screen, goes back to his car, brings back the part and puts it in. So when you know that when you buy a bigger piece of equipment, that it comes, or a car or a fridge, it comes with computers in it. Our look at technology is still through the main IT side of things, but the operational technology, because it goes across engineering, operations, and IT, is a bit of a challenge. For anybody who's interested, I did a survey of 18 utilities to look at the governance of operational technology. It's a very interesting picture, very interesting picture. And it is a real challenge. Anyway.
Yeah, Cello, I would be very interested in the OT side of things, because that's what we are trying to do, is to bring IT and OT together, because it's overall, it's you have to leverage the two technologies together. And I also want to add on, just going through this process, not only I'm hoping to help streamline and prioritize the project, but it's also hoping to shed some light on the resource planning as well as the resource needs as well. I think we all, like you said, the technology it's here. So how much is actually the technology need or team, the digital solutions the team needs? So it's interesting just what we need to focus on, what we need to defer, or what type of support we need as well.
Yeah, it's the differences between IT and OT, and I understand that there's a lot of talking, about merging the two. There are interesting things that people are saying, and these were people who deal with this. This was only utilities responding. Their number one concern was cybersecurity. They were really concerned about cybersecurity, for example, which is an IT issue. It's not really an OT issue that much. So it's very, there's not enough time, and I just wanted to mention, and I also see that Mert is offering to share the document that he didn't have a chance to go into in this. Mert, did you want to mention this before we sign off?
Yeah, I'm happy to email it. I'm pretty sure Cello, the participating partners, wouldn't mind sharing it in draft form at least. So I'm happy to get that out through one of you to this team, maybe through Dan. It just lists, these are the specific steps we have in mind. At least on my end, I've started to collect data internally to be able to do it, on what it means to actually develop a lifecycle cost model.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think we're pretty shameless about sharing stuff. We just put it out there, and people can judge it on their own.
Yeah, use it for what you can. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, Mert, feel free to send it to me or through Cello and Scott, either way. Be great to be able to share that out to this group. Well, gosh, here we are getting to the end of our hour once again. So thanks again to Mert, Ting,